Welcome to your 20-minute podcast with David Brower, brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/your 20-minute podcast. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Now, here's your host, David Brower.
Thanks, Allan. This is David Brower with your 20-minute podcast. And our guest today is David Gilks from British Columbia. Is that right, David?
Yeah. I'm in a little town called Nanaimo.
Very nice. David is the owner and developer of the Factor 3 fitness program. He's a medical exercise specialist. He created the I Am Project, and he's also a professional network marketer for Isogenics and has one of the top 100 businesses in the world. So beyond that, you don't have a lot going on.
Yeah, my days are pretty open.
Well, and you've had an amazing experience up to this point, too. Yoga, Olympic weightlifting, martial arts. So did you get inspired or have an epiphany about all this important fitness stuff at a young age, or how did you get motivated into this?
You know, I was on a 15-year bender.
I remember those days. Yeah.
Oh, it was ugly. It's actually, I was 28 years old. I was living in the south of Portugal as the assistant director of catering for a tennis resort. Okay. Which basically just meant I was an alcoholic because I had keys to all the bars, all the restaurants. And and I remember sitting up there and, again, 28 years old, never finished school, really been bouncing around the planet for years. And I had this, I don't know where it came from, but maybe the universe was speaking to me, but I had this feeling that, I could die tomorrow. Nobody would know because I was so far off the grid. Nobody would care. And I remember a quote that said, if your life doesn't make an impact, your absence won't make a difference.
Wow.
And it was actually a really sickening feeling. And it kind of freaked me out. I guess a moment of sobriety, but I stopped partying and I stopped pretending that, this was the absolute life. Though, I mean, by the outside observer looking in, I'm living in a tropical country. Life looks good, but it was
You're the man living life, having fun.
Yeah, it was a pretty selfish life overall, I think.
Gotcha. Amazing. And so all of a sudden you have this great epiphany. That quote is absolutely amazing, and you started working out. Where did you go? How did you start turning your life around, I guess?
Well, I had a conversation with my father, who I was kind of estranged from for many years, and he said, "Listen, if you're interested in charting a new course in your life," he said, "It's my father owned a natural health clinic."
Okay.
He said, "I can't afford to pay you, but I can give you room and board, but I can educate you."
Ooh.
And so. I swallowed my pride. Just think about, 28 years old, moving into your parents' basement. It sounds like a bad sitcom. And so I came back to Canada, and I started studying with him, and I studied with him for about 3.5 years. And of course, dramatically changed my health because I became a chartered herbalist. I studied Shinto acupressure, reflexology, biokinesiology. I became a bit of a recluse. Instead of the partier, I went the exact opposite, and I immersed myself in full-time study and full-time work. Yeah, for almost 3.5 years.
Wow.
And I find myself, I was very fortunate to have that opportunity to really step off the grid. Where a lot of people, if you got families and you're trying to make this change, or if you got careers and trying to make this change, it's quite a bit more difficult. But I had the opportunity just to step out of reality for a while. And focus on my health and my education.
What's fascinating about that to me is there's a lot of us guys that have had strange relationships with our fathers, guilty here. Right. And so to have the opportunity to train and work and study with your dad and change your life around, I mean, he's got to be so proud of you, and you guys have to be closer than you certainly were back in the day.
Yeah, well, it created a different relationship because we didn't meet eye to eye as parent to child,
right? But
we were able to meet eye to eye as more like man to man, right? More as an adult relationship, and there wasn't really, it wasn't so much water under the bridge. We just realized that that part is done. And somebody, and I can't remember, I'm sure I've heard it, read it in a book or heard it in a conversation, but, they said that, it's people do the best they can with the resources they have.
Right.
And we simply have to accept that. So once I got past that part of it, rather than trying to negotiate for a better childhood.
Yeah, true story. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, long since gone, I realized that, maybe this is an opportunity for me to really reclaim my life, because I felt that, 28 years old, that my life was already half over in my mind.
Right.
So no money, no education, no health, no nothing, right? I couldn't even get a bank account when I came back into the country because they didn't know who I was. I was so far off the grid for so many years.
How fascinating. And then, so you become this chartered herbalist, you're biokinesiologist, you're running this or working through this family clinic in Canada. Strength and conditioning coach comes next, I assume. Is that? Yeah.
Well, what I realized that being a chartered herbalist, as fascinating as it is, one thing about natural health care is that people really will often use natural health care the same way they use pharmaceuticals. They don't necessarily want to change their life. They just want something to make them better. So people are coming in for herbal blends. So we do wild crafting. We take saliva samples and we create blends of herbs based on their particular signature. But I can't, strength training was something that had always fascinated me, and I played with it off and on throughout the years. But it was the only thing that really kind of was calling to me, and because my early childhood heroes were Bruce Lee and Lou Ferrigno and the Incredible Hulk. Used to come home after school and watch that on TV. So I started getting involved in more taking courses on fitness, on personal training, and I realized that once I get all the garbage out of my system and I got the drugs out of my head, I had a very unique brain, and I had an incredible memory for data. I know, and not your birthday. I forget your birthday. I may even forget your name, but
yeah.
But for information, like for raw data, my brain was a sponge, and so I found when I got involved in the fitness industry, there was at one point I started running the training center for the first facility I worked at, and there were 6 trainers, and I did 50% of all the work, simply because I was wired so differently, and I could see things that people couldn't see, which is really strange at times, because it kind of felt kind of weird, because I'd be observing something, and my Achilles heel is the fact that I never finished high school, and that's my emotional Achilles heel.
Understood.
Right. So it's not the reality. And I have some of my best friends are PhDs, and we had these incredible conversations. But in the back of my mind, my ego still reminds me occasionally, "Hey, moron, do you remember? You never finished school. You were, out smoking dope when you should have been taking a class." And so every now and again,
were we like twin brothers in another life? Having these flashbacks that are just terrifying. So thanks for sharing. Yeah. Well, and then to get into that place, I can't imagine how this works, or how this felt, rather. But to get into that place where you've spent all this time, this energy, this education, this study, your brain being a sponge to be the chartered herbalist and do all of these things, and then all of a sudden, okay, here comes the strength and conditioning back into my life. Now you got this crazy balance of health and strength going on.
Well, and it became a really interesting exploration, because it's the one key attribute that I have in abundance is I'm observant. I see things that really for a lot of people would escape their notice.
Yeah. And
the more I got into it, the more I got into strength and training, it became a giant petri dish. The whole world. And if you were a client, I was more interested in the mechanics of who you are than who you are. I was fascinated by how you worked and how you functioned, and more fascinated by dysfunction. Coming through my own mental, if you go through your own mental dysfunction, you go from an absolutely zero health quotient, right? So your lungs are tapping out, your liver's tapping out, saying, we're pretty much done. And then to rebuild it, what I was fascinated by, what was happening under the skin, and what was happening psychologically in that transition. And I became very curious about my own journey, because if I could really understand how I went from, somebody used to say they used to go from zero to hero. How did I go from being off the grid to actually having a good degree of understanding, had a good client base, building a career. How did all this stuff transpire?
Yeah.
So I started observing, I started actually dissecting my past and trying to figure out how the journey was unfolding. Because if I understood how I did it, I could actually teach that to somebody else.
Fascinating. And I have to believe that with your ability to observe, take in information, study people, that people had to be drawn to you. There had to be a connection there where people are going, oh, I need to be with that guy. I need to work out with that guy.
Well, the interesting piece is that it's, we often hear that most communication is nonverbal.
Correct.
And I think the fact that I was willing to explore my history in depth, and and like so many of us, if you've got a birth certificate, somebody screwed with your life, right? That's the reality of it.
Sure.
But instead of actually, and I wasn't verbalizing, like some of my life chaos. I wasn't, or talking about it and beating on a drum about it, but because I was aware of it, and I was a bit aware of my experiences in life, and I was also very vigilant about what I was doing currently. People could feel that I was connected to some of my challenges, and I often believe that you can judge another person, or you can know another person by the scars that they bear, but it's nonverbal. And if you know somebody's had some challenges and is in a different place, I think people kind of almost energetically feel that, and they go, "Okay, I can trust you."
Couldn't agree more.
I don't have to say anything. It's all especially with males. Males are very, of course, very nonverbal. Yeah. And people would open up to me, women mainly, but people would open up to me and tell me the most horrific things about some of their life. We would go for a walk and just general talking, and it kind of made me realize that this was my path. I wouldn't be able to do this work if I hadn't had all those experiences, because I had no way to relate.
Absolutely. And is that where the I Am Project came in? Yeah,
it's I opened a private facility about 19 years ago, and a lot of my clients, my private clients, were medical professionals and lawyers and business owners. So these are people that were intelligent and successful by all means. But I was fascinated by the reason, or by the path that we take between knowing better and doing better. So we have something in this world called personal development fatigue, right? It's just
right.
So with this personal development fatigue, we take all these courses. It's like dieting. I tried that diet, or I tried that workout.
Right.
It doesn't work. So I was kind of curious about, so why is it that so many intelligent people, so many deserving people, are simply not getting what they want? And the more I started exploring it, I started looking into this whole process of neuro-linguistic programming. Of course, Tony Robbins made it famous to the world, but it actually came from John Grinder and Richard Bandler many years ago in the 60s. And so I became fascinated by the mechanics of thought. And then I realized that if I'm helping somebody rebuild, rebuild a shoulder after a rotator cuff injury, a big part of the problem is neurological, meaning that big part of the problem to the injury is not just in the tissue; it's in the brain. It's what the brain does when the muscles get injured,
right.
and how the brain stores the trauma of the injury, so that it changes the whole mapping, it changes the whole thought process around using that shoulder. And then neuro-linguistic programming also stays the same thing. Of course, when we are challenged throughout our life and we declare things as a trauma, mentally, emotionally, we also change the way we view that part of our world, and it becomes a neurological part. And so the same skill set that it took to actually rehab a shoulder was almost identical, other than the verbiage was the same way I would start actually move people forward in their philosophical life.
Fascinating. So you're focusing on thought sequencing, and which allows thoughts to be anchored to a specific philosophy, set of values. I mean, you're putting things into their head, for lack of a better term, that's really going to help them their injury improve, their health improve, their attitude about life improve. It's got to be touching a lot of facets of somebody's life.
It's pretty extraordinary, because Einstein had this great quote that said, if you can't take something and make it simple, you don't know it well enough.
Yeah.
you certainly don't know your topic. And so when I look at the IAM project, so fundamentally, if you're a client of mine, before I start working on your injured shoulder, I would actually check your core strength and your core stability. And then I would go in there. We may spend 6 weeks just building core strength, getting your core muscles apart, but getting you to think, feel, and do. So we create, again, that thought process that precedes action.
Yeah.
So, but it's the same thing when it comes to our philosophy. And in North America, I mean, we're so chaotic. We got so much stuff going on. We have so many belief systems. There's 1,000 books coming out every other day on, 3 steps to your best this and 5 steps to the shiniest that. And, so people have 100 books and they only get through the first 2 or 3 chapters because once the novelty of the information wears off.
Yeah.
But but I have an expression. I'm sure I'll get it'll come back to haunt me. But I tell people, listen, be a Catholic or be a Jew. Like, you got to pick a philosophy. You got to know what you stand for. And actually, so if you're like an author, let's say Jack Canfield is your guy.
Okay.
The old rock star of personal development. If he's your guy, then read everything he's got. Don't read 9 authors at the same time. You'll just make yourself mental.
Well, you can't. It's like anything else in life. You take the shotgun approach and you accomplish absolutely nothing.
Well, yeah. And so you're getting a bunch of people out there just feeling so frustrated that they're doing all this work. They think they're doing all this work, but really they're just kind of dancing around the fringes of reality, and they're not really making a decision at all. They're just basically, they get philosophically high every now and again when they feel a little bit down.
One of the quotes I really like on your website on the IM Project, a wisdom of Confucius, life is really simple, but we insist on making it complicated. How true is that?
Yeah, well, it gives us place for rationalization, right? Yeah. We can rationalize our the crappy place in life that we're at simply due to, it's not my fault. I mean, look at the challenges that I have.
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to take my son to Nicaragua for 3 months last year, and we're in the jungle. Like there's no paved roads, and there's just shacks. There's not a lot of homes out there, and just to give give my son that awareness of what the world really looks like beyond our iPhones and our Starbucks on every corner.
Right,
There's a real world. 75% of the world lives in struggle. And so just to give him that perspective, so when he came back to Canada, came back to North America, he'd have a bit of a different understanding of really, how simple life can be. And the most notable thing, and we hear this all the time, you go to the countries where people have these challenges, these economic challenges, and you hear laughter, and you see families hanging out, and
Absolutely.
You see kids smiling, and here people are losing their mind because the guy at Starbucks screwed up their order and they're about to go ballistic on the poor guy.
Absolutely right. Oh my gosh, that is so true. It's and we never. I think most of us don't take the time to do that, let alone be open to even hearing about it. Sometimes just to try to find little nuanced ways to simplify our life is really tough with that immediate gratification mindset.
Well, and probably, I find the easiest way to look at it, and this is kind of my mantra, the quality of life exists between knowing better and doing better.
Yeah.
And you would never be unhappy. You would have no happiness in your life if you didn't know better, because your ignorance is bliss, right? I didn't know.
Right.
I didn't know, right? I died of cancer from smoking. I didn't know it caused cancer. Nobody told me.
Yeah.
But we get into this frustration in life because we're in that contrast between the act of actually willfully, whether we believe it or not, willfully not doing or acting on the things that would change the quality of our life. But we're not even willing to explore it. We just kind of brush it off and we try to distract ourselves. My whole life has been since returning back to North America has been exploring the uncomfortable parts of that piece. So I know better. Why am I not doing better? And then I'll close the exploration.
Well, and when you're exploring the difficult pieces of your life, that helps you help others explore the difficult pieces in their life, right? That's part one of our great interview with David Gilks.
Your 20-minute podcast with David Brower has been brought to you by Audible. You can listen to any of David's podcasts anywhere podcasts can be found, including iHeartRadio, the Spotify mobile app, and at davidbrowervo.com/your20-minute podcast. Until next time, thanks for listening.